My second grade class had formed two lines, the red team and the blue team. Two students walked up to the chalkboard and each grabbed a piece. We all waited a moment before Mrs. Anderson called out the problem. 16 plus 5. Furiously, the two students wrote the numbers on the board. The girl on the red team, Heidi, wrote slowly, hesitantly, while the boy on my team, Nick, snapped his chalk in his eagerness to answer. I winced. Nick was good at math, but breaking the chalk was a real setback. Heidi hesitated once more, then wrote down the correct answer. 1 point for the red team. It was frustrating, but I knew the blue team had some strong players. Whenever we filled out our math worksheets, I was always among the first few to hand mine in with perfect scores. Today, we were playing a competitive speed game, one-digit addition or subtraction, and the first person to write the correct answer scored a point. The second round was my best friend Dan for red and Linda for blue. 18 minus 4. This was an easy one, and Dan was fast. He beat Linda in a blink. Blue team down 2-0. Now I was annoyed, but everything was still recoverable. Plenty of time to catch up. Except we didn't. 13 plus 6. Jessica froze and got one wrong. 11 minus 6. Jacob, bless him, never stood a chance. 21 plus 9. Andy dropped his chalk. Suddenly, we were down 0-5, and it was my turn. I was frustrated but confident. I could do all these problems in my head faster than anyone could write. And I was up against Katie, who never handed in her worksheets as fast as I did. The blue team cheered for me. They knew, and I knew, I could turn this around. 24 minus 7. I don't know if it was the pressure of performing in front of everyone or my frustration that had been building or the fact that this particular problem wasn't as automatic for me as the others. Probably all three. But I hesitated. I wrote the numbers wrong. I wiped them off. I fumbled the setup. And by the time the actual answer formed in my head, I heard the clack of Katie's stick of chalk hit the metal holder. Startled, I slashed the final mark of my answer and turned around. But it was too late. The red team erupted, jumping up and down. My lip quivered. My eyes welled up. I pointed at them, the whole row of red team kids, and shouted, "You're all a bunch of cheaters!" Then I ran to the back of the room and threw myself into a beanbag, sobbing. The worst part was that I knew they weren't cheaters. I knew my accusation was untrue. The guilt of that hit almost at the same moment the tears did. But the crying was the real problem. Growing up in the Midwest in the 1980s, everyone knew the rules. 1, don't cry about things that are your own fault. 2, don't cry over games. And 3, the strongest rule of all, boys don't cry. Not in public, not unless someone has died, and even then, there were limits. I cried anyway. Even after I calmed down, even after I wiped my face, I could see a couple of boys sneering at me. They didn't have to say anything. The damage had already been done. I had broken the rule, and once you break it, the label sticks. And for the next 2 years, it did. Kids brought it up now and then at birthday parties, in conversations, but honestly, they didn't have to. I carried that moment like a movie reel in my head, ready to play anytime I felt bad about myself. In my head, I became the crier. I don't remember exactly how Mrs. Anderson handled the situation, but I remember her threading the needle well, gentle about my feelings, firm about the false accusation. It was a small moment of adult calibration, and she got it right. What stayed with me, though, wasn't her reaction. It was what snapped inside me at the chalkboard. I didn't have the language for it then. I do now. Until that day, my self-concept rested on being the fast one. fast at worksheets, fast at mental math, fast on the playground, at foot races, fast at getting things done. Speed was how I measured my worth. If I finished first, or at least not last, I didn't have to ask whether I understood anything. I could just outrun the question. So when I froze at the board, it wasn't just a missed point. It was a tiny crack in the foundation I built around myself. A hairline fracture, but I felt it. And the crying didn't symbolize weakness to me. It symbolized exposure. Everyone in the class could see exactly how much I cared, how much I wanted to win, how much I wanted to be seen as capable. That was the real fear. Not failure, but the vulnerability failure revealed. Second grade is young, but not too young to understand that public mistakes can write private stories. And no one writes those stories more ruthlessly than a child writing about himself. For years after, I carried the moment with me. A couple of years of light, casual teasing reminders passed, and no one spoke of it again. No one probably remembers but me. But shame doesn't need an audience. It just needs a vessel to pour itself into. It took a long time for me to realize that what happened that day wasn't about math facts at all. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The change from learning as exploration to learning as performance. The beginnings of faking things I didn't understand. The first hints of the fragile confidence that would follow me into long division, group projects, middle school math, and beyond. And sometimes even now, when I'm in a classroom and I see a kid freeze in front of the class when asked a question, I can spot the same little shudder I felt. The moment the brain blanks, the room gets too bright and too hot. Most of them don't cry, but I always notice the way they walk back to their seat or put their head back down, shoulders stiff, eyes blank, as if beginning to rewrite the story with themselves. It's been almost 40 years since that math competition, but I can still feel the chalk dust on my fingers. I can still see the motes hovering in the air.